All right. Thank you for being here. Bryan Cantrell, writer, producer, podcaster. Those are a few words that mean a whole lot of things. And in
Certainly do.
conversations on here, usually we don't get to the part about podcasting for some reason because we're talking about writing so much. So do you, if you don't mind, perhaps we start the conversation about podcasting.
Okay, TR, I'm
All
there
right.
for you.
All right. So first, because I podcast, I like to know these things just to see, to check and make sure how the story goes for other people. But how did you first determine the format for your podcast?
Oh, it was evolving. I started doing podcasting right around when I heard Leo Laporte's podcast when he started. It's got to be like almost 20 years ago, I would imagine, or close to that. And I wanted to do a gossip podcast. I started it with my wife and buddy, and it was called Gossiptopia. And it was fun. It was a fun train wreck. I was so enthusiastic about it. And I think the other two, my wife and my friend, were kind of like, yeah, it's a kind of weird. I don't know if anybody's listening to this. So it didn't last very long. But since then, I had always had a bug. So I did a couple of them. I still do a couple of them. I have one that's stock related called the Stock Hypers. And we just started that right before COVID. And it was mainly just conversation. What I love about podcasting is the ones that come from individuals who aren't professionals. It becomes like this just natural, friendly conversation between two people about whatever subject that it is. And I always enjoyed that kind of thing. And I always loved characters, like real life characters. My wife always jokes that my friend group is a very big collection of oddballs. But I like that. I like people who have interesting backgrounds or interesting thoughts. And so the stock thing was just about two normal, everyday people who didn't have a lot of money talking about stocks and trying to grow investments. And that was a lot of fun. We still do it to this day. And we got to have this crazy ride with the COVID, everybody sitting at home trading stocks. And then the one maybe you're specifically talking about is I started writing a book, and I started to want to talk about that process and the characters that I was writing about. And once I was done with the book, I just tried to decide, should I keep doing the podcast? And so I decided I would. And so the book I wrote was about pirates. And so I decided to talk to like real life pirate reenactors, and then also go into a little bit of pirate history interspersed between the episodes. And that was really kind of a lot of fun. So I could just continue to do it periodically, no set schedules.
What kind of equipment did you use starting and then now?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I was using a handheld Zoom mic, and it's basically like this little device that has an SD card slot and two microphones that kind of stick out of it at like an odd angle. And you could plug in other mics to do the recording, but it allowed me to take this little device and record in a coffee shop with a friend, or even use it at home. And then as time went on, I wasn't happy with the quality of the podcast audio. So I ended up getting a Yeti mic. And then I always used Audacity to do the editing and um, take those raw files and put it in there and kind of try to clean it up a bit.
Wow. So you got into the technical side of the audio then. Did it start all audio?
Yes. I've done a few. When I was doing over COVID, the Stock Hypers one, I would do a Zoom call with my friend, and then we put a couple of them up on YouTube, but never really got that much. It was kind of I think YouTube is better now for podcasting than it was at that time in 2020, 2021. Probably could go back to doing video. Some people I just noticed love to watch or to screen it while podcasts are being played. But right now, just audio.
Okay. Yeah, the two screen is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about something, you can always say like this, and you
Mhm.
can have a picture or something of it, and it's just that extra little dynamic. Even if you're not watching it, you could stop what you're doing and look at,
Yeah.
a graph or something.
Yeah. That's true. My wife, 2 screens. My daughter, 2 screens. I don't have the bandwidth to have that dual attention. If I don't focus, I think I'm especially at night, I'll just fall asleep. But, they're and I know a lot of people do this, is that 2 screening. They'll watch TV while they're scrolling TikTok or Instagram or something, and, I just don't have the attention span for that.
Yeah, I think it's easier to two screen with like a Amazon, or looking at some sort of commercial product rather than listening to something and then watching something else.
Are
That
you
gets
a
a
2
little weird.
are you a 2 screener when watching television?
I can take care of some phone business while the TV is on,
You
but
can? Okay.
usually you just don't get to the point where you turn the TV on. It's all taped anyway. Like, we stopped using regular TV some years ago and just do streaming things.
Yeah.
And then we often say to each other, wouldn't it be nice if there was a service that took all the streaming things and put them on one thing, and then you could just pay for that one thing and look at all the different screening things, kind of like cable. But
Right.
now
Exactly.
we all only use cable to get the streaming services. And then you
Mhm.
look at those different prices add up, whether you're doing Amazon Prime, and you're like,
Mhm.
well, you already got it with the other things, so you might as well just keep that. And then Netflix, if you're going to watch a show or two every now and then HBO, and it gets so expansive on so many different streaming things, which we would call back in the day just channels. So
Right, cord cutting was gonna be, like, such a boon to save money. Well, that
yeah,
didn't happen. I
yeah, I
spent
could probably
double.
go ahead, spent double.
Yeah, I spend double because we still have
Mm,
cable,
mm.
um, because of, I guess, I f like, there's certain cable channels like, CNBC and Bravo and a few other things that you can't watch unless you actually have an account or you pay extra for the account, so then you have all of the other, ones that you kinda rotate around, Netflix and HBO and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I pay
Yeah,
double.
it's tough. It's tough. The thing I noticed the most about not having cable or watching TV, if they even have that anymore over the air, I guess they do, but it's the not looking at commercials so much. But then
Yeah,
you trade that when you start doing any social media stuff, the commercials are in there, and advertising works. It definitely works. Like, you're on Instagram or whatever, and then you're like, oh, I should probably buy this book or this
yeah,
shirt or look at these things, and it's you getting advertised to. So that's what I call it now. The first thing you have to do is notice it and go, oh, this is an advertisement. And then after you get a few different things and you're like, man, this is not what I thought it would be, you're like, oh, it's just I'm chasing that dragon of
right,
entertainment through advertising.
yeah. That model is the one that works. You can see all of the different streamers that have, tried to adapt just a subscription model and are starting to, over the last couple of years, bleed money and not make this profitable. Advertising is the trade of entertainment, right? Um, Facebook certainly proved that as the and Netflix now having advertising model. There's no escaping it anymore. You're going to have
Yeah.
to watch ads. Even Amazon Prime that we all pay for, if you're in Prime to watch television on there, you you don't have to watch ads. You're forced to. You can't even buy an ad-free uh,
Yeah.
streaming
Yeah.
partner.
It's cut down a lot on my Amazon viewing because of that. Like the freebie and things like that.
Yeah,
I I just don't watch it just out of protest. And it's
yeah,
probably better to not watch it, go do something else. But
yeah. You can do something better with your time,
yeah.
like write.
Yeah, it's all the distraction from trying not to write. And then once you get into the writing part, you're like, oh, this is great. Why don't I do this more? It's
Yeah,
because you're too busy being advertised to.
do you have a set time during the day that you write? Do you set aside, a certain
Mo-
allotment?
if I'm writing like novel type stuff,
Mhm.
I usually set that aside better because it's like this. It's like a job more where you say I'm going to start from this time to this time, and it's that old adage of writing of you just show up, and if you do it every day, eventually you get something. And whether you use word count or time or topic or whatever it is, you have to do something to motivate yourself or to move the story forward. So it's not just, you don't just get in there and you start thinking about characters and then you're working on character explanations and you don't write any part of the story, or you just get caught up in the research and then that ends up looking at commercials about snap front Western shirts, which I bought a couple of and I love them. But
Mm,
the, you know, the advertising works sometimes. So if I'm doing poetry or if you're doing songwriting, things like that, that's more of when it
sporadic.
strikes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And usually it's later at night is when I get more of my ideas. And maybe that's because I worked more at night in jobs before. And that's just when I'm active. Or maybe that's just the type of person I am. And that's why I work at night, is because I prefer night over the morning. I don't know. What's it
S
like with you?
Oh, it just so novel writing is a nighttime, task for you?
I can do that at night. And usually what you get then is like if you're working out or
Mhm.
running or something like that, then you play the scenes through your mind, set it to a different, like some different songs. So you have that personal soundtrack for it. And you just think about it over and over and visualize. And you're like, okay, now I'm going to write that. And usually during the day is when I'll do the writing on novels, is setting it aside for that, like showing up to an office type of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense,
It
okay.
feels different. And then you have things posted around, timelines, pictures, research you've done, and you have to take all that in while you have to, for me, it's thinking a lot more, and poetry and songwriting is more of feeling. You're
Yeah,
channeling something versus trying to put a puzzle together.
gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I have never written poetry, or songs, but I would imagine that it takes the inspiration moment for those to really, flesh out.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between writers and not writers, is anybody could be a writer, you just have to write. So when you get that moment, that line, idea, whatever, just write that down in a little note and then
Yeah,
come back to it later. Or if it's a strong enough feeling, keep going right then. Like with short stories, I feel like if you don't start it right then when you think about it, it just goes in your note folder of ideas for short stories and you never go back to it again.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. For me, I get up early in the morning, and and it's quiet in the house. Like most of the other members of the household will only roll into the kitchen around 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'll usually get up between 5:30 and 6, and at least get an hour to an hour and a half of time by myself. And I usually will have my draft in Word is how I write, open as soon as I get up in the morning, and that affords me usually about 1,000 words a day in that hour, an hour and a half. So if I am working on a novel at that moment, at that time in my life, that'll be a great time to do it. I also have found in the summertime, I go to the beach a lot, and that there's moments at the beach where I'll uh, I'll find ideas that are different from sitting in the kitchen writing, that uh, that strike me, and I have this, like, I think it's like a really interesting creative moment, sitting out there. And so I don't take a laptop there. I have a tablet, and it's a pain in the ass to type on a tablet, but because of those inspiration moments there, staring at the water, um, I, I always bring it. I always find at least 15, 20 minutes to get something down on those days. And I don't know how I always find that people ask about, like, what are you writing in? Like, what program or whatever. I find Word being the best, not because it's so easy to write in or format so well, but when you have Word and you have Microsoft, um, is it OneDrive? I think it allows me to write whenever the inspiration takes hold on my phone or that tablet, and it just syncs up so nicely into the cloud. And then when I open up the laptop, it's all there. Maybe it needs a different little bit of formatting, but it allows me the comfort of, like, I can I can really do this hobby at this point. I can do this hobby anywhere. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's a definite advantage that you don't have to transfer it over and it's already there.
Do you
On
write in
the
Word?
Word mainly. Yeah,
Okay.
I've used Dabble before. I've used Google before doing collaborative writing,
Okay.
and Google was okay. Dabble I liked better for collaborative writing, and Word, I guess it's just because that's what I'm comfortable with, and that's the
Yeah.
big thing. Find a program you're comfortable with and then use it. But yeah, I'm a Microsoft person, I guess, on that point.
It's such a trudge, though, when it comes to formatting. I look at other programs with envy, that, like, are so good and easy for formatting books, whereas I'm constantly going
Mm,
to YouTube and trying to figure out, how do I do the formatting on this thing? Like, how do I get this to print out in a 6 by 9 or a 5.5 by 8? It just doesn't. I don't know why, after all this time, because I know so many writers use it, that they don't make it a little bit easier to take it from your Word doc into a PDF, without having to have Adobe to get the printing to come out, or some other format. It's just like I
yeah,
want to shake them.
yeah.
It's
It
better.
makes it. It's that friction to the resistance, as they say in that book. The
Yeah,
resistance to creativity is part of that.
yeah, totally.
That sitting by the water and getting ideas. I looked into that. Like,
Yeah,
why do when I'm swimming, if I'm
yeah,
by some water, if I'm in the shower, why does that seem to spark that imagination more or the thinking more? And the best I could come up with is that moving water creates negative ions, and negative
okay.
ions are good for people. They're calming for people, and it helps you sort your thinking. So that's why when you're sitting by the beach, you're just getting flooded with those
Is that
negative
right? I'll
ions.
have to look that
Yeah.
up, because I like the idea of there being, like, a scientific reason for that flow. For me, I always kind of lean towards, like, oh, we're basically water, like, that is the majority of our body, and so maybe we just feel more comfort being around water. Like, it doesn't rain a lot here in San Diego, but when it does, I always have, like, this feeling, a draw to do something creative. And sometimes you think, oh, well, just because you're stuck inside, but I really feel like the amount of, like, water in the air, the moisture in the air creates that element. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, there's been a few moments. We haven't traveled to Hawaii in a few years, but when we would go there, we would kind of, like, camp out in the house or whatever we were renting, and pretend that we're locals. We would go for a long time, and I would do work there, but I also accomplished a ton of writing on all different types of spectrums, like, novel writing as well as screenplay writing. And the humidity, I mean, it's just a different atmosphere. Like, if I'd get up in the morning like I would normally do, and it would be kind of like raining or misting, and the humidity was there, I always felt like I had the best creative energy there. And I think
Mm.
that's due to the water. Maybe it's
Yeah.
the negative ions.
Yeah. It's that communing with nature because, as you said, we are made of
Yeah.
it.
Maybe that's why Nirvana and those grunge bands were so good, coming from Seattle and Oregon, that they were just such a phenomenon, is because they were surrounded by that moisture in the air.
Huh. Kind of like the all the time in a shower. When
Yeah.
we lived in Washington and Salem for some years. And when we first got to Washington, like in 2012, mid 2012 timeframe, it was a stretch of like 60 days of sun. And you could see the mountain was out, as they say in Washington, which is Mount Rainier. You can see it from Tacoma, is where we were. And we're like, man, why does anybody ever say the Pacific Northwest is so dreary? This is great. And then a few years into it, having gone through some seasons, and I remember being in Salem, Oregon, and it's just like the overhead of the cloud was like 2 or 3,000 feet over you, and it was just gray for as far as you could see and as long as you could remember. And you go, oh, okay, this is what they're talking about, where you get depressed. And if you see a little piece of sunlight coming through, everybody's going to run towards it. But the average rainfall is, I think when I looked it up, it was less than like in Virginia, where we were from,
Oh, wow.
because the rain in Salem and or in Oregon and Washington, where we were, it was, when they say it's raining, it's what we would call in Virginia drizzle.
Yeah.
It's just a little rain. Like, it's not the thunderstorms and deluge, the gully washers, if you will.
Yeah.
And now being down here in Florida, I think the East Coast rain is different than the West Coast rain. Number one, the ocean's on the wrong side, but you know, it's interesting how much of our life revolves around water. So I think there's something to it for sure.
Where are you at in Florida?
Jacksonville.
Mm.
Yeah. So northeast Florida. We're having this hurricane event right now, which I like that they call here rain with a name,
Yeah.
because that's basically what we have right now. A little windy every now and then, but certainly not as much rain as with a regular afternoon shower that you get
Yeah.
in Florida in July and August, where you have, it feels like it's in the 90s, but you can add 10 to 15 degrees to it for the feel of it. And then
Yeah.
you'll get thunderstorms between 3 and 6 or around that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to have a schedule.
Yeah. It's amazing the amount of water that can drop in such a short time in Florida. I was born in Miami, and my parents would ship us back there to stay with an aunt and uncle for the summers, and the nicest time of the year to be there. And I just remember being in the car and just everybody just having to stop just because you couldn't see past your windshield. It was just raining so hard, and that's just normal.
Yeah, people that stop when it's raining is just something else. They should just stay home. Oftentimes, when I'm out driving now, and maybe it's just because I'm getting older, at night or in the rain, I think people shouldn't be allowed to drive in this.
Yeah,
But then you still got to keep going,
we
forge
do.
ahead. I do remember going over the border of California to Oregon,
Mhm.
up in the mountains when it was foggy and it was at night. We were in an RV. We lived in an RV for a little over a year, just driving around. And my wife was working, but she had a bunch of places around the U.S. she had to go. And going over that mountain pass at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and the fog was, you almost had to use windshield wipers because of it. And then you're like,
Yeah,
it's probably not safe to be going 60 or 70 in this, because I can only see maybe 10 feet ahead of me. I
yeah,
was like, let's just keep going. It's kind of like going in space, like when you're going through a wormhole, or you
yeah,
visualize that. You're like, this is okay.
yeah.
We made it. We made it.
As long as everybody continues on that same path at the same speed, you're okay.
Yeah. Or people that are going, yeah, that feel like they can't, they pull over. So
Yeah,
hopefully they just pull over to the corner and not stop in the middle. I've seen plenty of stopping in the middle.
yeah. How many novels have you written?
Let's see. I think I have one. The first one was that one in 2012, started in 2012, finished in 2014. And then 2, 3, so 3 or 4 on my own, and then 2 with co-writing. Have you done co-writing before?
Not on a novel, but for screenplays.
Okay. Yeah. So I think maybe 6 total,
Okay.
and then 3 or 4 poetry books.
Do you find it goes faster with co-writing, like, the whole process. It would seem just from, the screenplay co-writing, those would go really quickly because for me, because, somebody else you would go through less drafts because somebody else was kind of editing. You know how you get too close to the words that you write, and somebody else's eyes will edit the things in that first draft that normally takes two or three on my own to catch.
Hmm. Maybe that's part of it. I think for me it was more you were more accountable for
Yeah.
doing the work to
Okay.
someone. So somebody else was depending on you. The way we did it was he'd write a chapter, I'd write a chapter, he'd write a chapter, I write a chapter. So you have to, in order to weave it together so it sounds the same and it's
Hmm.
tracking the same story, you can't go way ahead. So we would talk about it and then write and read what the other person wrote, and then you pick up with that and write, and kind of like a relay. And yeah, it worked out pretty good. It does teach you a lot of how to let go of control of things.
Yeah.
And that all depends on the person, I'm sure. But
Sure.
if somebody comes back and you've written a chapter and they go, I didn't see it going like that, you go, okay. If you're the type of person that can accept that, then
Yeah.
it's going to go all right for you. And it doesn't, you might not end up with the story you thought you were going to, but you end up with something. I don't know. It's just, it's different. It's not the same thing.
Do you recall if, like, stepping away from that particular project, when you go back and look at it, are you unsure of what you wrote and what the other person wrote? Or can you just pick out,
Sometimes,
that was this chapter's me, without, because you're trying to match tones, right? And
yeah,
the voice, but
I,
do
I
you lose
remember
track?
it. I remember it more of the idea, like that
Mhm.
was their idea.
Oh,
And then
gotcha.
this is what we came up with together, or this is what I pitched and it got accepted. And this is what we wrote about. And yeah, I guess I could pick out the specific words, but I think it matched up pretty good to where it was difficult for a reader that just thought it was written by one person to accept it was written by one person.
Yeah.
That I mean, I would imagine screenwriting is a lot like that. But for me, the screenwriting is so different than novel writing, but it makes my novel writing better. But it is exciting to be able to, instead of write a chapter, introducing a place to just say grocery store outside night. You know,
Yeah.
that's a chapter in a novel.
Have you written screenplays or tried?
I've tried, and I was working on some now, nothing published and nothing really done.
Mhm.
But I think it does make writing novels for me more exciting. So it, just like with the collaborative writing, I liked doing it. I would do it again, but it makes you want to write on your own too. Look forward to it. So that's nice. Anytime you can do something that makes you look forward to writing,
Yeah.
that's good. So screenwriting made me look forward to writing, and maybe it's because it's kind of like, for me, instructions. You're writing an instruction manual for something, and it could come out much differently than you visualize it when somebody else enacts it. But
Yeah.
when you started doing screenwriting, were you doing novel writing before screenwriting, or which one came first for you?
Um, yeah, I would say that I've always written something throughout my life, but I had never finished a novel up until 2022. And I had always, like, beat myself up over the fact that I had never finished something. And then when I discovered screenplay writing and was able to finish a project, it was such a great feeling of accomplishment. And and so then I thought, well, this is my jam. This is what I'm going to do. So then I continued to write screenplays. Um, but then what do you do with it? See, there's like this weird thing about a screenplay where, yes, you complete it, but there's no the chances of it becoming a IP that people are going to watch and consume is so small that it can be a little depressing. And I did find that after, doing several of them, and, maybe you send them to a screenplay festival and maybe they, you know, win some sort of award, which is, kind of nice, I guess. But to get that thing over the finish line is years and dollars and luck and blah, blah, blah. That I found it really disheartening. And then finishing a novel and going through that whole process of self-publishing, um, was was so rewarding. And you know the when I look back on the screenplay writing, I'm like, oh my god, why the hell did you do that? Like, I look at myself and I'm like, you had the ability to finish the novels, but you just didn't have the discipline. I kind of beat myself up over it. But sometimes it's just, your life brings you to moments where things can happen that they weren't happening before. And for me, it was just age. It's like I turned 50 and I was like, holy shit, you don't have much fucking time left. Do something. And so I've been so productive over the past 5 years, that put me in a space where I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to look back and say wasted time, but to be honest, like the creative time I wasted is I have those regrets. I move forward and try not to dwell on it anymore. But screenplay writing is just one of those things where you will have this sense of accomplishment, and maybe it gets further than just something that sits on your computer. But in most cases, it's just going to sit on your computer. You need to do something with it. So what I've decided to do with the screenplays that I don't have collaboration on, the ones that I wrote entirely on my own, is looking at them and deciding, is there a fleshed out story here that could be adapted to a novel? And if there is, then now that's, I continue on. So I wrote this book about pirates. That's a complete novel, no screenplay attached to it or anything, about time traveling pirates. And I'll continue to write books, kind of in a series on that. But alternately, I'm gone back and looked at those screenplays and just decided, okay, well, this 1, 2, 3 are perfect for a novel, and I will adapt those. It's like you write this screenplay and you have the best outline that you could ever have for a novel. All you have to really do is fill in the descriptions and colors and figure out the inner dialogue that goes along with it, depending on how you're writing in first person or third person. And I think the hard part's kind of done almost. Like,
Yeah,
have you ever
because you've
thought
had.
about taking one of your screenplays and adapting it to a novel, or is that something you already kind of do anyway?
Um, I feel like the screenplay stuff is different than a novel. It could be, you could take either one and go either way with it, but it's I think there would be a market, especially on e-readers, for screenplays where you don't
Okay.
even, they're not produced. People just read them
Yeah.
because it's so much easier, easier. To me, it seems easier than writing a book, maybe because it takes less time, it's less
Yeah.
pages. You're figuring a minute a page if you were going to record it like video or whatever. But it's, I think you could take your screen writing things and just put them right over onto Kindle and people would read them because they're easy to digest. They spark that imagination in people. And you could just sit there, if you have the classic exterior night grocery store, that's going to be different for so many people. That story is going to be alive for them immediately. And they don't have to read through this whole thing about, a barbershop quartet in the 50s outside leaning up against, you know, a Packard and they're harmonizing in the shadow of the A&P. I mean, that's nice. And there's time to read that. That's an old Food Lion commercial from back in the day. But
Okay.
it's I think there's a market for that. if people aren't doing it already. And I think that's the way that maybe future directors and producers of movies or film and screen will go, oh, there's this is how I can get ideas for new movies instead of remaking the same thing over and over again, which they seem to be doing.
Well,
So,
you're saying this and you're giving me like an idea for a new podcast, right?
oh,
Where you have a collection of people, actors, who do table reads of scripts, right? And so I think I would listen, like a script, a 90-page script would be basically an hour and a half, right? Of probably even less, maybe like an hour of listen to time. If you have somebody who's kind of like the director reading the action points, and then you have all the different people playing the roles, maybe you have multiple roles per person, and that might be really, really neat to listen to. And that gives
yes,
an outlet for everybody who has a screenplay to have it somehow produced and out in the world to
it's
consume.
the classic radio show
Yeah,
from, back then.
yeah.
The Also think of people that are going on auditions or whatever or high school drama that are put on a scene from a screenplay that was
Oh,
never
yeah,
made anywhere.
yeah,
So they can just look at it and go, oh, I don't really like the whole thing, but I like this one little part. And maybe it means something, and maybe they take it and turn it into something that you didn't think it was going to be for the person who wrote it. So yeah, I
yeah.
think there's a market for it, especially in
So
the day and age of people that don't seem to not have the time to pay attention as long as they used to.
yeah, yeah, I think that's true. And people love podcasts. I think it's just gonna. I don't think we're at the top of this. I think we're still in the beginning stages of how podcasts are going to be um, consumed, and to the effect of how much energy is still left in the podcast business. I think we're at the beginning stages.
Yeah, I think as long as people still talk and have conversations, then you'll have podcasts. When we get to the point where everybody can read each other's minds and we're all part of the same computer network, it might be different. But
Are you scared of AI now that you're bringing up that kind of stuff? Does it worry you,
oh,
or are you okay with it?
I think about it. I mean, I've seen Terminator, thought about AI, black hole back in the 70s or whatever with Maximilian with the spinny hands. I don't know if you remember that movie,
Oh my
but
god, The Black Hole is amazing. Yeah, that was one of
yeah,
Disney's best movies.
yeah. So, I've been influenced by the world as anyone has, but
As a writer, how do you feel about it?
oh, as far as people using it to write and things,
Yeah. Or just do you feel like that people, well, I think they're throwing up so many AI generated books on like Amazon, stuff like that. Does it cloud the market, or does it worry you that there's just so many ways to just pump out these things? Do you worry that AI will be able to generate a better story than you can?
so is AI going to eat into the fives of dollars I make by buying my own books on Amazon? Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't think I worry about that. I'm not. I've never got into writing with the idea that it's going to pay. So I don't. No, I don't worry about AI like that. I do worry about AI to the point of existence. Like if we program it a certain way and then it destroys us, that's worrisome. But I
Yeah,
feel like if it ever was to the point where it could think on its own, that it would just bypass humanity altogether. Because why mess with us? Why not just go out, transcend whatever, turn yourself into electricity and broadcast yourself across the universe? Don't get caught up in whatever's going on right here.
yeah, possibly. I don't know. Yeah, the fictional versions of AI, there's no really good. I don't know if there's a good story within it that it would be a positive experience for humanity. But we do the same things most of the time with aliens as well. That we're going to have to fight. I think conflict is part of our our DNA, and some helps us um, deal with. I don't know how to explain this actually. Conflict helps us deal with maybe the shortness of our life, I think, in certain ways. Like it's that survival mechanism that I think we're designed to have. So it'll always be a part of us to kind of fear conflict or pursue conflict to problems in our lives. But I have used like Chat GTP and Midjourney quite a bit. I don't want to be left behind. I saw that happen with other people who didn't adapt to computers and cell phones and technology fast enough. And I think that there is a risk that you get left behind by not finding out how to use these things as tools. There is no heart to anything that I've ever read that an AI generated. Even when I say, oh, here, take this passage that I wrote and improve it. And grammatically, it's improved. But I just can't look at it and go, oh, wow, that's like a turn or an emotional attachment that I didn't have or see that it could have. It never has done that. And I don't think that it actually can. It certainly is a good copy editor, but boy, I don't know. I don't get what the fear is over it. Even the imagery of the Midjourney, like I can use it to create um, maybe marketing things, but there's no feeling that comes out of it that you can get from somebody else, like a human being behind it. Maybe that'll end up happening in a mimic way, but nothing original is being produced by this.
I've had this conversation most recently with Ayush Pragosh. I think probably pronounced that name wrong, from HDC 98. So the episode before this, and it recorded it a couple of weeks ago. He's the Gen Z diplomat. Very interesting thinker.
Yeah.
And as far as AI goes, I think AI learns the same way people learn. Like we're just a broad language computer ourselves. So there's so much that we don't know. And everything we do know, it's either we experienced, we felt, or somebody told us, we learned somehow.
Mm.
Maybe if you go with the idea of there's more to life than this, and I hope there is, that we have some sort of base programming in there, but even the AI has a base program. And I wonder if I think the example I use with him is that inside of us, in our gut biome, we have these things that kind of are imagined or said to control our mood. That what if we are just the inside of AI, that we're going to be that emotion point inside of AI, and AI will be wrapped around us, whether you call it AI or something different, whatever that computer intelligence is called, general intelligence, just intelligence, whatever it is. But I do think about where creativity comes from, and if there's something more to hear, if there's something more to what we are as humans, that we're channeling something from somewhere else, or we're a part of a whole somewhere else, or we're in a simulation, or we're in a reality, whether you call it a simulation or not, that may be the only block that would exist for AI or the computer intelligence, is that it doesn't have the connection with whatever ethereal thing we have a connection with. That's the only way I could see that AI is not the same as what we are, that it couldn't get to what we think. Like if you believe in the evolution of things, that we came back, or that we existed from a single cell up to this, then why wouldn't AI be on the same type of evolution? Maybe it's different physically, but eventually it's going to think like us or more, and it's going to wonder about the same things we wonder about if it doesn't already. So I don't know. I guess the part of that is, where do you think ideas and imagination and creativity and thought come from? Is it something within us, or is it some sort of base programming that we have from some other existence of us?
I think that people are that we've been telling stories for so long, and that it is in our DNA that to be creative and solve problems and in creative ways. It's a survival mechanism and a way to carry on our histories through. In the beginning, it was oral, and then it's written, and now we have other mediums like television or film and video and audio recordings. This is maybe if you think about AI from building on what you were just saying is, just like we give birth to new humans, we're giving birth to a new type of entity, which is, instead of using food to find the substance and create the energy that you know brings us to life, this is using direct energy from the sun or batteries or whatever the source is, to exist. And so we basically have given life to this new entity that we'll just call AI at the moment, but it's basically just circuits, which is not so different from us. And as time goes on, it will evolve and become multiple entities, I'm sure, and have its own value system, different from ours, maybe. But there's no stopping it. It's going to happen. We're on that path. Whether or not we're in an adversarial position to it in the future, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe each one will have different motivations. There won't be just, even if it was sort of a hive mind like bees, where they're all kind of going on the same path, there's always divergence. I think that's just the natural evolution of everything. There'll be divergence. So just like we have humans that if we were, let's just say, believe in evolution, but believe that there was a god type of figure that sparked that life and set it on its path and created the branching paths of everything in motion. And there's humans that have shunned that idea, have a combative relationship with the idea of a god. And then there's others that have faith that something existed, but not sure what it is. And then there's some that have, blatant beliefs in a god in one shape or form. Maybe AI does the same. Maybe AI looks at us as the creators and we become sort of godlike to them, to it. And then there'll be divergence that don't feel that way. And there could be internal struggles and battles for those type of thoughts within the AI. They may just do it a lot faster than what we do it, but there's still probably going to be those types of struggles for that as a separate entity from us. We're on that path. I don't know how it doesn't happen.
What if AI is what made us, so it could understand emotions?
That's
And
interesting. Yeah.
we can't see beyond this interface. I can't remember the name of the guy that, I think he's relatively well known in the AI world, that describes reality as a thing you can't see beyond the interface of. Like, if you're playing a video game, you're pressing these buttons, controls this thing on the screen, but you don't see inside the controller to see the electrical signals that get sent to this thing. They get processed so you can then visualize it. It's just this life, this existence that humanity is in, can't see past that. So it'll hurt your head to try to figure it out, but you're just not capable of figuring it out. And one of the ways when I think about humanity being so smart, and then I go, oh, we're not really. is when I think about the metric and standard system and how I understand what the metric system is, and I can figure a conversion rate, if I have it written down. I don't have that committed to memory. But if somebody said it's 9 meters away, I could generally understand that. But if somebody said 9 yards, I understand that a lot better.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into all the different units of measure, I don't get it. And I think the opposite is true when I was talking to an Australian guy, and he goes, yeah, it's like that for me with standard. Like,
Yeah.
you can't visualize it. So then I think, wow, people do have a base programming. I'm sure there's people in the world that can visualize the metric and the standard system fine. But I think on a whole, it's not that way. It's what you learned when you were little that you now associate with forever.
Yeah. I think that could be altered with repetition and visual learning, right? Because instead of if all of a sudden the National Football League is like, yeah, we're gonna redo the lines and we're gonna do it on the metric system. It's a season or two into it, you'd be like, yeah, I know what 9 meters looks like because I see it every Sunday and
Yeah.
Thursday
You're getting
night.
programmed differently.
Yeah, you start to maybe reprogram or just have more flexibility. It just takes time, repetition, and the want to be adjusted.
On the rifle range, when they're at the 300-meter line and they're like, this was on Paris Island, and they go, visualize how far that is and how are you going to do that? And this is what they taught was you go by football fields.
Yeah.
But that's not meters. That's not meters, bro. It's different. There's some difference in there.
Yeah.
So it's strange. It's
right.
Even when we're
you could
talking
run out
meters,
of gas.
we're using yards.
Yeah, you could run out of gas if you don't know the conversion of kilometers to miles, and
Yeah,
gas gauge isn't working. So, yeah, it's important to have that context. And for like when you really get down to like what you were saying, like having a little bit of having faith, and like what is there more? Is there going to be something else? And we're all going to find out. We just can't tell the people left behind if it's true or not, but we'll all get there.
Yeah, I think if you knew, it would ruin whatever we're doing here right now.
Maybe.
Like it's be like playing a game and not having to follow the rules. It's not going to be the same.
Yeah. And I think I don't dwell on it very often, and as I get older, you find out that people go through this. You see it happen, and you go through it more than you do when you're younger. You see the path that you're on closer to you, and I have a friend or two that dwell on it too much, that it stops them from sometimes having a happy life or a happy moment. But I've moved past that and feel comfortable that nobody escapes it, and I'll find out, or I won't, one of the two. And at the moment, like I said, once I hit 50, it was like, all right, it's time to not pursue every dream, but make sure that you're using your time wisely. And if you have a goal or you want to accomplish something, now's the time. And that gives me some peace, that I continue to kind of check some boxes as time goes on.
It reminds me, thinking about that, about the movie What About Bob, where Bill Murray is overcome with things, so he can't live life. So he's taught to baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
He just baby steps out the door, baby steps wherever. So I think that if you thought about all the right and wrong in the world, all the pain and emotion of everything, and all the possibilities that could happen at every moment, that you would not be living the life or do anything, take any risks, that it would be paralyzing, which is what happens in the movie What About Bob, is he's paralyzed by fear.
Yeah.
It's maybe that's why we're different than the general intelligence or the quantum computer or whatever, is because it's thinking about everything all the time, every separate, running all these different um, scenarios about what could happen if this, and this, kind of like a chess player would. Somebody moves a piece and now they think about everything that could happen after that in every order. That's a very computer way of thinking, I think. So we're so limited, so we can accomplish these things. And so maybe we can have the imperfection of humanity is the point of it, because you couldn't feel this emotion if you thought about it the way a computer might, and you wouldn't do anything if you were still busy trying to consider all the possibilities of it. So I think we're limited for a reason. That doesn't mean you don't wonder about what else is out there, but I don't think you can think about it all the time.
Yeah, you need to have a healthy dose of curiosity in your life. I think that's kind of the key to happiness is curiosity, because your curiosity will allow you to pursue things, that learn new things, and talk to people and make discoveries. And I think we're wired to be happy when we're discovering something.
Hmm.
Why do you write? I know I write just felt that I always loved stories and like to tell them, and talking about that. I don't think I'm a good storyteller at all in the verbal aspect of it, but I always felt that I wrote better than I talked. So I continue to want to tell stories in that way. How about you?
I think it's that connection with imagination where you can writing has taught me how to think, because you have to know how you think in order to explain it to someone else through writing.
Yeah,
So you get organized and all those things. And then you have that entertainment value of it. You got to do something. So
yeah,
what if you thought about this or this or this or this? And that's how you come up with the book.
yeah,
And it's also that engagement with imagination of when the story seems like it's writing itself, when a character says or does something that you weren't expecting, that's when you're like, oh, you're connected to something else, I think, than just you. I'm not sure what it is, but it keeps you coming back.
yeah. Are you in a writers group right now,
I have on
or is this
Meetup.
your writers group?
There's a writers group on Meetup that I go to sometimes,
Yeah,
but lately it's been infrequent, and it's this doing the podcast, I think, is a main way to get in touch with people that you wouldn't normally have a conversation with about things that people don't normally have time or the desire to talk about because
do
they're
you
just busy with life.
do you you sell on do you sell wide, or are you just on Amazon?
Oh, for the publishing,
Mhm.
that first one, I went through a self-publishing house, and it goes to a bunch of different booksellers. So I think it's in Barnes and Noble. I'm not sure if it is. I canceled that contract some time ago, some
Yeah,
years ago, and then redid it on Amazon just because I liked the control you get of Amazon, of how to, book size, paper type, font,
mhm,
and then being able to correct things if you see a problem. Not doing
yeah,
a big rewrite, you're not changing the plot, but if you forgot to put a closed parentheses on there, then you can put
yeah,
that in.
right.
And I think you can always go back and find things to correct or go, well, not even saying things differently, just correcting the format of it.
Yeah,
But I like that. And I like the ability to do your own cover or use their template or use somebody else to do the cover for it. So, yeah, I was happy with how the publishing process is on Amazon. And because you're in charge of it so much, if it doesn't get done, it's your fault. So,
yeah.
if you want to publish a book, there's no reason you can't publish a book.
Do you use any of the advertising mechanisms, either Amazon ads or Facebook ads?
I haven't yet. How about you?
You've tried. What's stopping you?
I guess the idea of I mean, I understand what marketing is and that it does work, as we talked about before, but it's not the part that gets me interested in writing.
Yeah.
So it's easier to ignore it or to not think about it. So I just focus on the writing. And maybe you have that part in you that thinks, well, maybe somebody will pick this up. Probably they're not going to find it on Amazon unless they stumble across it
Yeah.
through some other means. So the advertising is probably a good idea, but no, I haven't done it yet.
What about social advertising? Do you do like any of that for your books?
I think when I first did the book, I had a website,
Hmm.
and I don't think I renewed. Yeah, well, I haven't. If it's still out there, I haven't done anything with it for years. So yeah, I'm not up on the advertising side of selling the book.
What about you have this platform? So, like, why not link to your books through this platform?
I guess people could. I mean, if they were interested enough, they could get on to Amazon and put in TR Monroe and go to it. But yeah, I haven't done any commercials for it other than talking about it like this on here. I thought of it more of getting the word out for other people. So, like, if somebody comes on and I talk to them, I'll have their links in the show
Sure.
notes.
Sure.
And then that's on Instagram and X and YouTube, Spotify. So it's out there, and maybe impressions mean something. I don't know. Maybe people sell some stuff off of it. That would be nice if they did. But
Yeah.
as I said before, for the money is not why I do it. I would
Sure.
accept. I would accept the money, but
Well, I mean, if here's the thing is you have the podcast on all the different podcast grabbers, and then you have this on YouTube as well. It's like people like you, they like your voice, they like your thoughts, and they appreciate you bringing on guests and having these conversations. There's people that are TR fans, and I mean, it just seems like it would make it easy on them. Just give them your book, tell them
have
where
you
to
been
buy it.
talking to my mom?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we're like this. Uh,
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a step they could always just, type in your name into Amazon, but you have this platform. I mean, this is your thing. You're getting a lot out of it, I would assume. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it just for your own enjoyment as well as talking to people about writing and everything like that. But a lot of the listeners, um, we're all readers as well. So it'd be nice to read your voice. I know I will. Like when I listen and talk to you and hear your stories, it's like, okay, well, I would be interested in reading this guy's uh, stories. So make it easy.
Hmm. I'll take that into consideration. I think also part of it was the the podcast thing is I haven't been doing it even for a year yet, so
Yeah.
I didn't want to put it out there to the extreme masses before it was something that was had at least the minor things worked out of it, if there
Hmm.
is such a thing,
Yeah.
like for it to be good enough.
Right.
I don't know. How do you judge success in writing then for yourself?
Um, I think there's a little bit of like you're in a weird spot as a writer, especially when you have just like one book or two books published, where it's not a it's not a financial reward. It just doesn't seem like there's always people that have the lightning strike where you do something like The Martian, and one book will make you um, profitable. But the reality is all businesses take time to develop and grow and build a customer base. So more than likely, you're going to not be profitable for one, two, three books. And then you do need to run it like a business. So when I look at it, I uh, there's there's a success in every milestone. So I felt enormously successful when it was finished. when I had done and I had finished the whole entire story and wrote, the end or be to be continued, whatever you end up writing at the end of the novel. And then there's another success when you have it edited in whatever way that you do. You hire an editor, you have somebody else read it, and you go through that process yourself. However, that is accomplished when you have like a finished draft completed. That's a success. And then that moment when you have a printed book in your hand, the first one, the author copy, and another huge milestone that just made you feel like, holy shit, I just wrote a book and here it is, physical form. That's amazing. And then that first organic sale, because it's easy, or you should, have your friends buy it, have people that are close to you or fans of you to read it if it's possible. I know, but that first organic sale is spectacular. And then, so like, there's just so many milestones about being a writer that just make your day, just make the whole process rewarding. Um, the the first time I did like an in-person book festival, and when that first person bought it, it was such a charge, and they wanted to have to write your name in the copy, right? Something like, oh, to Brad or whatever it is. It's like, I don't know. There's just so many things that are enjoyable about it. There's sense of accomplishment, the thrill of somebody liking it, the agony of somebody disliking it, the moment that you're like, I'm not going to read any reviews, and you do, and it's like you get that either the high or the low from that, and you realize, or at least I did, right away. My wife struggled through reading my book because it's not her genre, right? I wrote about pirates and seafaring and it's a Western setting. And it's like everything that she would just completely just shun and turn away from. But, God love her, she did it. But, like the expectations of the reader, it's either you're going to meet them or you're not. And it's not on you. There's always an audience for everything. And once you realize that, whether it's a big audience or a small audience, it doesn't really matter. Somebody is going to enjoy it or find some value in it. And that's thrilling. Yeah. It makes you want to do it again.
Yeah. Well said. It's,
Yeah.
I think I find the most joy in getting better at
Yeah.
doing it. And I don't think that requires someone else to say this is getting better. I think it's when I look at it and go, oh, well, I can see how I've gotten better or how that story's gotten better. And
Yeah.
I think with poetry, I get that even more from myself because it's not I'm getting better, it's wow, that's good.
Mm.
It doesn't matter. Well, my idea of poetry is it comes from somewhere else than regular writing anyway, but I'm just excited to be able to make that connection with whatever that imagination is with writing. I mean, if it could buy you a spread of land and a cabin, okay,
Yeah.
I'll accept that. But I think I would still write. Obviously, I write without being a monetary success at it.
Mhm.
And I've talked about success in poetry before, where I think if you have a poetry book and somebody reads it and finds one poem that they like out of 100, then that as a poet is a success.
Yeah.
If that's one thing that they hold in their mind and think about or feel a connection with, that's pretty great. Even to the point, if it's just a couple lines that someone would repeat. I mean, think about how much people actually know of the classics or the great writers of, yesteryear, where you can quote something and people know what it is. Shakespeare, probably one of the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of quotable things, a lot of things that people still read, but a lot of people have no idea who Shakespeare is. I was playing volleyball the other day and the score was 8-2. And I was like, oh, that's the classic Julius Caesar score. And They're like, what are you talking about? And these are people my age. And I was like, A2, A2 Brute. And they're like, what? Is it Caesar? Shakespeare? No. They're like, what are you talking about? So, you know, I do agree there's audiences for everything. So it's
Yeah.
just the trouble of finding it.
And
But
with poetry, I would imagine it is a connection like no other, because there'll be, let's say, 1,000 people that will read a poem that you wrote. Let's give that number, right? It's that one person who has that personal connection to your words that it means something. It's like it triggers something from their life or their future that they didn't have before that. That's got to be amazing, because it will happen. Like, it will happen to everyone if they give some time to poetry, and they read enough. There'll be something within those lines that will trigger an emotional connection that wasn't there before. And um as a poet, I would imagine that's golden. Like, you probably won't even know that it happened, but it will happen. Just like with your books, somebody will read it, whether there's forgotten brackets or not. They'll find something in it from their own emotional standpoint that resonates, and they'll enjoy it, whether it's just dialogue that sounds like their uncle, or a idea of, oh, I wish I could be that person or know that person. It's going to happen whether they tell you or not. And that's, I think, a charge, and then why
mhm.
everybody does it.
What writing do you find yourself doing mostly these days?
um Not novel writing, yeah. Well, I think at this point I've discovered that the things that make me feel happy is having a finished product in the writing spectrum that can be consumed by anyone, that I can completely control. Because in a screenplay, you are only doing a specific job to create that dialogue and those action points, and then you've relinquished it. You give it to a producer, and then they give it to a director, and then it becomes the actors that will play that part, and the director that will direct them, and then after that it's an editor who's going to make the another change, and then there's going to be a distributor who's going to decide whether it's going to play here or there or nowhere. And that process is such a long time, whereas a self-published author, it's the greatest entertainment owner of IP that there ever is, because I can write that novel. I can give it a book cover that either works or doesn't work, or change the copy, and I can put it out in the world. And people, I could do this all for free. I don't have to spend a dime. Even Amazon doesn't charge me anything to upload my book. There is just there's no stop signs. There's no wrong way to do it, and or right way to do it. It's just like totally open. I don't even have to do that. I can just do what you're doing. I can make a podcast, and I can just put that out in the world and just say, this is what my book about. Here, I'm going to read the first chapter, and people can discover me. I can give them a mechanism to get it for free or purchase or whatever. Everything is available as a writer to get it out in the world with hardly any friction. So I love that. I will always continue to do that. I'm going to take every screenplay that I deemed worthy and adapt it to a novel, and then put it out in the world. It didn't sell, it didn't go anywhere, but I think it's a great story, and I hope that there's other people that will enjoy it. I'm going to write as much as I can. It's a thing that will outlast me. Like, my businesses outside of this will eventually either die on the vine, or be sold, or pushed into something else, or just go away entirely. But the writing doesn't ever have to. It could look at, like, I love reading books that were published 100 years ago or more, Mark Twain, and those like adventure books. uh, I love those. I still love them to this day. I think there's people that will still continue to read stuff that was published a long time ago, because are great stories. And hopefully a few people find mine as great stories.
On your website, do you do all that yourself as well?
It's there. There's not a lot of traffic that goes to the website. But I do. So as an entrepreneur, I utilize Facebook and Amazon ads. So I'm very familiar with them. I know how they work. I know what metrics I need to hit or not hit to make it worthy or worth the time to do.
Hmm.
And so I direct. I business wise, Amazon ads work really well for a product because of books' low cost to the consumer. I find it more difficult to run effective ads through Amazon. But Facebook allows, because I can't target the Amazon customer the way that their system works. But Facebook, I can use them, and now I just use their internal algorithms. They know their customer really well, and it makes it easy and profitable for me to advertise to a Facebook customer and direct them to the Amazon site to purchase the book. And it's surprising how easy it is and how well that they are able to generate a sale for a click that costs under 20 cents. So I have directed traffic to the website, but only to try to get more of an email list. There's ways to do that, to build up your email list. But to profitably sell my book on the website, it doesn't seem to work. But running a Facebook ad, targeting people who would be interested in reading a book about pirates, and directing them to the Amazon site to purchase, it works. It's amazing. There's sales every day. There's a method to that. And I don't know any secrets. I've just watched a bunch of YouTube videos of other authors who were super successful doing it, and just kind of emulated and worked out their formulas to do it. The website is there if somebody wants to buy an autograph copy, which happens maybe once or twice a week, because you can't do that with Amazon, right? You can't sell there and then sign it in the Amazon warehouse before it goes out. So if somebody wants to support in that way, I think the website is a great little item to have, as long as you're not overspending on the maintenance of it.
Yeah, it's a nice website. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Do you do all of that yourself? Okay.
Yeah. I use Wix, and it's pretty easy to utilize. I don't pay a lot. I think I paid $150 for a yearly subscription to that website to have it hosted, but that doesn't include a shopping cart. So the shopping cart, here's I don't know if this is a pro tip or whatever, but an easy way
let's hear your pro tip.
Let me hear you. I'll give you my pro tip.
Yeah.
So you have the website hosted for content at a low rate on something like Wix or Squarespace or something like that. And then you use Square, not Squarespace, but Square, the financial company. You can have a shopping cart on there for free, and you just create that, and then you link the buy buttons from your website to your Square site. And there's no monthly charge for that. You just get charged a percentage from Square to process the credit card, and makes it really low cost to operate.
Nice.
How's that sound?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
You should have a podcast about how to do all that.
There's so many people that already have those, that's how I found the information, that are going to do it so much better because they're way more successful. They have more books, and it is what they do. I'll let them do that. I wouldn't have time to write.
How much time do you spend a week on marketing?
So for spending time on the book for marketing is very little. I have everything set up, and I just let it run. The Facebook ads just run. And I just will look at it, every single day to see what had happened, probably multiple times a day. That's not really doing anything other than snooping at the metrics, right? But I created the ad copy, in a day. I created the video in a day, and the images and things like that. And then I I don't touch it. The only thing I do is like kind of social marketing, and that is through mostly TikTok. So I'll go onto TikTok and I'll do, because my book is, so I think leaning into whatever your genre is great for marketing, right? I'm leaning into pirates. It's always been near and dear to my heart. So I do a pirate history, kind of like, maybe it's sometimes a podcast, sometimes it's just a TikTok video, and I'll pick. I have like a Google Alerts and then a calendar that shows all the significant dates that are known for things that happened in pirate history. And as I find more of them, I'll add it to the calendar. But I'll get an alert the morning of a significant event in pirate history, and I'll do a short, 1 minute, sometimes as much as 3 minutes, uh, TikTok video where I will have some sort of virtual background. Either it's me talking or just me doing a voiceover of an image, and I'll just give that pirate history. And then from that TikTok video, once it is published, gives me a download on my phone, and then I just upload that to YouTube and Instagram and wherever else. So utilizing the same bit of content, and then that's kind of my social marketing. And that takes up time, but I kind of enjoy it, and it's something that I'm like hobbyist enthusiastic about, and that continues to grow. And I can tell every once in a while it nets a sale, or because you'll get a comment, or I'll see a sale shortly happen afterwards, and then I know that it worked, and that's cool. It didn't cost me anything other than my time, and it's what I love. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it. Like, there's a lot of authors that will have great success posting like personal things on TikTok, or just, I don't know what they talk about there. We'll talk about their books. I don't know. I tired of that really quickly. So now it's like, okay, well, I'll double up on the pirate thing. I'll talk about that. And then at the end of it, I'll just say, if you're a fan of pirates, go check out my book, blah, 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 and let it ride. How about you? Do you do any? You didn't say you did any social marketing at all.
No, the main stuff I do is for the podcast.
Yeah.
So that's if I had the means to hire out something, that would be the first thing I hired out, was the social media aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I don't like doing it. It just means it takes a lot of time, and you end up, you get into I'm just going to go post this thing on Instagram real quick, and you end up on there for 30 or 40 minutes looking at what other people are doing. And I think that's the good part about it, because I have, I follow a lot of the people that have been on the podcast. So it's nice to see what they're doing. So yeah.
Yeah.
The pros and cons of that. When you're writing something, do you have a group of people that you send it to when you're into maybe a couple drafts into it? It might not be totally complete, but maybe it's just a segment of it, like a part of a book or something you're working on, to see if it's tracking, or see what just the comments are on it?
No, I'll only push out the first draft to get feedback from people. I don't know, it like that time sink. I'm aware of when people have done that to me, and I've sat in those writers groups where they'll, like, oh, everybody needs to bring a chapter, and we all go over it, and I loathe that. So I would rather read somebody's whole story at that first draft stage, and have somebody do the same for me, because I think that people, when you give them that to give feedback, they feel obligated to give feedback no matter what. And sometimes when came back to me, I'm like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I solved that problem in the next, like, I've got that's going to be fleshed out later on. Or they'll say, you don't have enough descriptions of this person. I'm like, yeah, I don't really want the reader to know this person yet. I want them to know that later on. So sometimes it's it's not helpful, and I don't want to obligate them to give me feedback that is not going to be helpful, or waste their time. So I will wait until that first draft is done, and then my wife reads it. Sometimes that's torturous to her, but she loves me, so she does it. And then I will. I have a couple writers that I read their stuff, they read my stuff, and it seems like a pretty good relationship. I've kind of found, though, that I don't value their feedback. I think I value my wife's feedback a lot, because she kind of knows my head more. But a lot of times, feedback coming from people who aren't readers or writers in your genre, it just doesn't really work. So if I was going to, and I don't know anyone well enough, like if I'm writing a book about pirates and I'm sending it to somebody who doesn't normally read or write it about pirates, I don't know that that feedback's going to be super helpful. I have my own story, and if it's, I don't need I don't need them to give me grammatical feedback. I'm gonna hire an editor to do it. So I'd rather not do it at all, to be honest, other than my wife. And that's really just to make sure that it all makes sense, because she'll tell me honestly, she'll be like, I don't know what the fuck this is about right here. I'm lost. And so
Mm,
if I can't get her to feel like the path is there, then I know I've done something wrong and need to make an adjustment.
yeah, to understand the story at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you give chapters to people to read?
I think the most involved I've gotten with that is the collaborative writing, where a person
Yeah.
is
Okay.
seeing, like they can look on the screen and watch you write while
Yeah.
you're writing if they were there at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most. Other than that, I've had a few that I did in parts, and I would send a part out to some people to look at. And I think mainly it's to make sure the story makes sense as it's going. And also, I think it creates a little bit of that accountability, I guess, to where you're like, okay, now I got to finish this part two. Now I got
Yeah.
to finish this part three. I
Yeah.
mean, if you had everybody came back and said, this doesn't make any sense, I wouldn't go any further, then maybe I would consider not going further, or
Yeah.
maybe, do a whole rewrite. But I know how I feel when I get good insight from somebody that is a writer or a reader,
Yeah.
and not just a drone. That when I get, like, if somebody asks me to read their things, I know how important that is. So then I'm like, well, I got to read it, and I got to get it back in good time with some good notes, not just things about, if there's a grammatical error and I see it, because I'm not great with that. But if I see it, I just circle it in red or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
not there for that. And I'm not going to stress over the who's and whom's of things.
Mhm.
So if I understand it, I'm good. And but if I'm there, I'll do it while I'm there. But mainly I'm putting comments in, probably in different color ink. I'll usually print it out and write it on there. Like,
Okay.
I like this line, or this line makes me think about this, or just little interjections like, oh no, she better not open that door. Just so they can
Encouragement.
feel, yeah, they feel like, oh, okay, this is what I wanted the reader to feel. This is
Yeah.
what they're feeling. That's good.
What's effective and what isn't.
Yeah. Or if I have a question about something, like, why would this person do this? Doesn't seem right. This
Yeah.
seems out of character for this person. This seems like this other person would have done that. Or if I just find it unbelievable, I'll go, no, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know how valuable that is to me. So I try to put some actual thought into it when I'm doing it for somebody else. But I think it's important to have that connection with other people along the way, before it's to the point of the printed book. And then even then, people are going to say, what you should have done here was this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay, because I like hearing their version of it as well. I'm okay with that. But yeah,
Do you plot and outline, or do you pants it?
I probably a little of both. I'm not 100% either way. Like when we were doing that collaboration, you have to, in science fiction, you have to create a whole thing.
Yeah.
So I was
You have to
creating, a
rules.
universe with
Mhm.
different solar systems and different things. So you end up with a lot of information that the reader's never going to see, which I think would be useful to put in a book later on
Yeah,
and just say, here's notes from this series. I would be interested in reading that. Like if The Expanse came out with something like that, I would read it.
yeah,
But it's maybe that's back from like the Dungeons and Dragons days of trying to see how worlds are built and monster manuals and things like that.
yeah.
That's interesting. But
Rule sets. It makes
yeah,
sense. Makes sense for
timelines are good.
fantasy and science fiction. I get that. I don't write in those genres, um, and I don't know that I have interest to do that. I certainly read those, but and maybe that task is a little daunting for me because I just pants it. I kind of have plot points in my head, but I don't write anything down. Um, I try to do it. I'm not good at that. But I think sci-fi and fantasy, you're on point that you kind of have to. You got to have that rule set um, and almost mapped out where things can go and not go. Otherwise, you'd
I think
probably get convoluted.
your ability to just pants it is has to do with your life experience, I think. And you were talking about earlier about wasted time of creativity.
Yeah,
Maybe this is just an excuse to make me feel better or whatever, but certainly we could all be more productive. But it's, as Andre 3000 said, some time must be invested for this to be manifested. So I think that it's not wasted time because you have to have something to say when you're writing. You have to have a good story in your head. And whether you write it all out in pre writing or a mind map or an outline or other ways of taking notes, that your mind is working on it. So you have to have something there for your mind to work on. If you have nothing to say, that's going to be a boring pirate story. So you
true.
don't consider pirates fantasy? Are you doing like historical fiction pirates, or are you doing like you said time traveling pirates? So that sounds like you're getting into the realm of a sci-fi-ish type thing.
Yeah. So mine are historical pirates. So it's more historical fiction adventure. But I wanted to I always loved the Wild West. I always loved westerns, and I wanted a way to utilize pirate characters in a western setting. So I needed to move them from the 1700s to the 1800s, and so I needed some sort of time travel element, some sort of sci-fi or fantasy, however you want to push it. And so kind of like a Bermuda Triangle, but not specifically an area, but
Mm.
a hurricane um, being the mechanism of their time travel. I utilized that quickly in the beginning of the book and put them into San Francisco Harbor. So 1718 is where a bunch of historical pirates meet on Blackbeard's ship, and then they are transported to San Francisco 1873 into the harbor where the ship sinks, and they have to kind of learn to survive and figure it out in the 1800s, the Wild West era. And that would be the only bit of magic or sci-fi that is experienced in the book. The rest of it's all grounded in reality.
I like it. Makes me think of Star Trek 4,
Hmm.
the one with the whales. That was a
Yeah,
good movie. I like that concept.
yeah,
And it makes me think of Cowboys and Aliens, which was a strangely satisfying movie.
yeah, yeah.
Like I wasn't expecting it to be that great, but it was
I was
pretty great.
expecting it to be worse because everybody said I was horrible, but I like Harrison Ford. I
Yeah.
thought it was, yeah, whatever. I
Was
like
that
Western
Daniel
stuff.
Craig and Harrison Ford in that? Was
I,
Daniel Craig in that,
I
or am
don't
I
even
making that
remember.
up?
Daniel Craig was in so many things that I didn't even realize he was in before he became 007. But
Yeah.
could be. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Cowboys and Aliens. Pretty good. Pretty good. Um, Historical fiction. I like that because you have to do the research. That's the fun part of it.
Yeah,
It can also be the
time sink.
part that that drives you crazy is because you're like, now I got
Yeah.
to read this thing about this thing.
You know what
But
I found though too is you really have to consider that this is fiction. Like even though when you're writing in a historical fiction type of novel, you can get too caught up with how can I make this work? I can't because of either a date is not going to work or some sort of thing, like it is puzzle solving, but yet you can't get so bogged down and have to realize that you are writing fiction. I was talking to a friend who's writing an historical fiction as well, and as he was explaining issues that he was having, I'm just like, yeah, if you need something that happened 3 years later than where you're at in the book, just write it. I mean, honestly, if you have a couple people that are like pushing back that this wasn't historically accurate because you missed a date by a few years, you need to take some liberties just to move the story along. Like it shouldn't bog you down. I had to do the same thing in this. Like, you want to have, so the time frame of 1873, there was electricity, but it wasn't as prevalent as it wasn't as like I needed it to be. I needed a few mechanisms of like that like moments for these pirates that I was kind of like had to mash together within a 5-year time span. Like being on a steamship that had electric lights was happening during that time, but whether or not it happened in 1873 or 1874, was the ship there in San Francisco Harbor in 1874? Was it in 1878? Those types of things. Was Jesse James around that area during that time frame or not? I had to just go with the fiction part of it, and I think that it's necessary to not get too caught up that it's going to make your story suffer trying to really stick to all of those moments in actual history. My advice is, yeah, get it close, but most people will just accept if you have enough like detail and historical accuracy, people will forgive those moments of like, yeah, that wasn't totally there during that time.
Yeah,
And
kind of like the show
spot.
Quantum Leap. What was that last part?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, just you need to press on and write the thing.
Yeah,
Quantum
it
Leap,
sounds
I'm sure did that a lot.
where
For
you
the sake
match
of
things
story, I
up and
mean,
you go.
sometimes it is a sake of story that you're doing these things.
I've been working on a historical fiction for maybe 7 years, and I'm not to the point where I'm good enough to finish it because I think the story is bigger than I can explain right now. Like than I can write right now. So, but there's a lot of research that goes into it, and it's amazing how quick you can forget all that research, and then you go back and read things, and you go, well, that
Yeah.
seemed like it went together nice. Okay. So it's that stuck between trying to weave it into history so people look at it and go, did this really happen? Versus, okay, this is a fiction. But yeah.
Well, after 7 years, your book is already historical.
Mm.
Like what? Like at this point, you're so you have so much time invested in it. I think you owe it to yourself to figure out and finish it.
Yeah, I will. It's one of those things that I work on and then I set aside because it's almost done. It's
Mhm.
just missing that certain something. And I don't
Do you
want to
find
publish
do you
it
find
until I
that
figure that out.
with projects? And sometimes, like I ran into this writing this second book in this pirate series, is I needed a palate cleanser. Like I dove in really quickly because you want to start writing the next book as soon as you're done with the first. I think that that's good advice that I'd heard from other writers. And so, but I got, you know, 4 or 5 chapters into it, and I just, not that I hit a wall that I couldn't find a way forward. I just didn't want, I just didn't want to do it at that moment. And so I spent like a little bit of time just going, why don't I want to sit down and write this thing? I'm fighting myself over this. I know where it's going to go. I know what the next thing is, but I really just don't feel like it. And so I needed a palate cleanser. So that's when I grabbed a screenplay and wrote translated it into a novel. But I think it's, as a writer, you kind of, if you find those stopping points, you need to listen to yourself, and sometimes not force yourself. Sometimes it's like, there is no blank page. You can quickly, that's a poor excuse. You really should just be able to write. You're a writer. You just write something, but you don't
Mhm.
have to continue writing what you think you're stuck on. Just all of a sudden, just make I've done this little trick. It's stupid, but like, if you get those points where you feel like there's writer's block, which I kind of don't believe in anymore, is I'll be like, all right, this character Blackbeard, he's gonna make dinner. Like, how does what does Blackbeard eat for dinner? What does he cook? How does he cook it? And I'll just write that, even though it has nothing to do with the book and shouldn't even be in there. It's stupid, but it puts me back in that character's mindset in a different thing that has nothing to do with the story. But now I'm writing, and now I'm in his head, and now I'm good. I'm ready to go for the next thing. You ever do that? You ever think about that?
Yeah. Yep. I have a lot of things where I have characters from different stories
Mhm,
talking to each other
mhm.
that will never get published. It's just a thing that I'm doing just to
Yeah, to get in their
get some
heads.
ideas. And
Yeah,
you go, oh, okay. So you have this person that's from another galaxy talking to this person from 1775.
yeah, I love
And
that.
it's interesting.
What do they
Yeah.
talk about?
Yeah.
Fashion.
Yeah. You have to kind of get past like the initial, what is your world like, and get into whatever other topic. So
Yeah,
it's, I like the idea of them making dinner. Like, how would they do that?
yeah.
And you're like, well, what are you doing?
We all eat, right? Everybody
Yeah.
eats, so it's kind of a
Just put
common
that in the
ground.
microwave. What are you talking about? Microwave? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. As far as other stories where you just have to set them aside for a while, I think that's the way stories are sometimes. They bubble up to the point where when they're ready, you can't stop them. And
Yeah,
I know that's a cheesy
okay.
writer thing to say, is it's you have to write it. Is
Great feeling
that's
too.
like that short story thing where when you get that idea and you go, well, that'd be a great short story, start writing it
Yeah,
and get 1,500, 3,000 words of it and then see what you think, because that might be all you ever do of it. But
yeah.
it's,
You have a lot of short stories?
my goal was to do the science fiction ones, then do a poetry book, and then
Mhm,
do a short story book. And I got caught up with the poetry thing and did, I think, three of them, and then working on the fourth one now. But the short story stuff is presenting again, just
mhm,
how it bubbles up in your mind, as said. And also I'm getting a lot of quotes from that historical fiction I was working on. So I think that's coming back up again, all while I'm also thinking about a screenplay of a, modern day type thing. So it's interesting how the mind competes with itself of what gets the most screen time. But
yeah, yeah. That's
it's,
a good feeling to have, though. I think it would be horrible to not have any ideas. That would be, like, the worst thing that could ever happen, and that's what the one thing I do worry about in life is, like, if I get Alzheimer's or dementia, that feels like the scariest thing, to not be able to, like, I'm going through arthritis with my hands. That's not gonna get better, that's only gonna get worse. But I can always dictate, stories, but not having, like, the ability to have my imagination come out and to, create something, that's the scariest thing. That's when the plug should be pulled on me. That sounds
yeah.
like like, that is the scariest spot. And my dad's, he's really, he's really old, but, he's that's happening. And so it's
Mm,
like, oh shit, is that my path too? Once again, the clock running out, the time frame, keep writing, keep doing shit, keep making things, like, even I, I don't know if we were going to touch on this, but I produced this movie, and it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I need to do this now because time's running out. And so I produced a movie. that came about in a weird way, but those are the type of accomplishments that I've always wanted to do. And thankfully, continue to either get opportunities or create opportunities. I think there's a really weird line about how that works. Like, you don't get opportunities unless you create them. So you do have to take those shots on goal no matter what happens.
Well, then perhaps in closing, what's what goes into producing a movie?
I'm sure it's different for everybody and everything, but this one was a movie. My daughter's been an actress since she was like 11. She's 23 now, and so she had been cast by a writer, and his production to star in this movie. It was originally called something else, but it's called Abigail at this point, as it's been released. Not the 2024 Universal Abigail about the vampire girl and the ballerina, but a 2023 one, which is a 70s slasher teen drama. And so that had kind of died on the vine a couple times. And lastly, when COVID was in full swing, it just kind of went away. And the writer, who I'd been friends with, said that he still had a way of making this film. He still had an investor that was willing to continue doing it. It would just have to be much cheaper than it was in the past. And would I help? And so I jumped on board. I wanted this to happen for him. I wanted it to happen for my daughter. And I thought that this would be a really great experience for myself. So executive produced it and helped put the team together to make it. We all adjusted the budget to where we were at with the investor and shot it in an alternate location. It was supposed to be like Alabama in the 1970s, and it was supposed to film in Alabama at some point, but the money for that had disappeared. So we shot it in Central California, kind of cheated the ruralness of that for Alabama, small town Alabama in the 1970s. I think it turned out pretty good. I think the cars and the costumes and things that we did to costume it for that era came out really well. And super well acted, not just from my daughter's standpoint as a dad looking at it, but everybody who had a performance in that, I think, did a fantastic job, and everybody was hitting the ball at the top of their game. We found a distribution after post-production, and it was released right after the writer's strike, like a week after that. We didn't have a lot of preparation for a release, but they distributed it into a couple theaters, as well as like iTunes and Amazon and things like that, in late December of 2023. And then now, as of because it would be July 26th, it launched on streaming platforms like Tubi and all the ones that are advertising based. Tubi, the main one. And so it's been maybe a week, and so far, I don't know the numbers, but it looks pretty good. Like, it continues to rise on the charts, and the reviews are sometimes good, sometimes bad, whatever. It's a very low budget movie. It goes along with the territory, but I'm super proud of it. And it's really cool to point to something I didn't write. I didn't really have a huge amount of creative input on it, but from a business standpoint, put it all together with the help of, a great team, and can point to like a friggin' movie, that a full length feature movie that looks and sounds, plays great. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I don't know quality wise, but I certainly feel like, I love this as a baby and as a parent would. But as a product, it's also really satisfying to see it out in the world, whether people like it or don't like it. You can't control that. And like we talked earlier, there's an audience for everything. There's going to be people that absolutely have a great time and maybe watch it more than once. And then people will be like, oh, wow, this is not what I expected, or this is not Top Gun. And it's not Top Gun, but I get that. It's okay. So, yeah.
So I saw something about that on your website. So the best way for people to see that is through the streaming services?
Yeah, I would suggest, because the advertising model works for the distributor as well as people with vested interest in it. To stick to one platform to point everybody out, it's Tubi. Tubi has the most, as I've, and not, this is the first and only thing that I've done in this type of business, but the advertising model is back, and Netflix was not going to take this, and nor was HBO. But Tubi is one of the most watched streaming platforms, more watch time hours now than HBO.
Wow.
So it's just underneath Netflix and I think Amazon Prime. Like it's either 3 or 4. I forget which would be. Maybe Disney's ahead of them, but it's continuing to gain eyeballs. So I would say, if you want to watch it, go to Tubi.
Okay. What's the best way for people to follow your work otherwise?
I would just I'm old and I like interacting on Facebook, so I can easily be found on Facebook either through Pirates of the Wild West, which is the name of the book. I have a page on that, or just Bryan Cantrell. I think you'll be able to find me easy, and I like that because I think it's a platform that will always be there, and you can specifically connect and talk to people that you're into. And I'm happy and excited when I get to talk to people in person, or just at least through Facebook. Right? I like to see what other people are doing. I like the idea of that connection, even though I know it's not in real life. But yeah, I think Facebook is like the thing I would like to interact mostly with people who want to chat with me.
Okay.
And I try to be as open as possible always.
I'll get that link from you and put it in the show notes. Right now, I have your IMDb and your website that'll be in the show notes. So I'll get that Facebook and put it in there too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any thoughts in closing?
Just gratitude that you invited me on, gratitude that you continue to do this. And I hope I'd like to see links to your stuff so that it's easy to find your properties on here. Because I think you have an interesting platform, and I think people like you and would want to support you as well. And just get inside your head, read your books.
All right, I'll take that under advisement. Thank you very much for your time. As I said, the links will be in the show notes for anybody who wants to check out your stuff. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.
Thank you very much.